Hey y'all, and welcome. So things have updated on Zoom since I've been here. I hope that I'm recording. I think that I'm recording. It is July the 8th, 2024. And today I just kind of wanted to get on here and talk about some stuff that's been happening out in the world. Gonna turn captions on. Okay, yeah, so I just want to talk about some stuff that's going on in the world and specifically about Celine Dion because I recently watched the documentary I Am um, and was kind of like very pulled and tugged at. So I then went on this astrology like binge session with all the dates and stuff that have been dropped from her and about her experience. I want to talk a little bit about that astrology. And I also want to talk a little bit about politics, which isn't normally what I talk about because I have a lot of feelings about politics. And it's hard, if you've been here a while, you know that I like to bring in like a lot of nuance. And it's hard to talk about stuff and cover all of the nuance that's necessary. And so, anyway, we're going to see how this goes. The other thing is, this is the first time that I'm using a new kind of internet situation that I have. So, this is also a trial for that. So, there's a lot of there's a lot of trials that are happening right now. So I appreciate you being here. And let me know your thoughts about everything that I talk about here. If there's other stuff that's happening out in the world that you'd like for me to touch on the astrology with. If nothing else, like it lets you see the charts and kind of take some thoughts about it. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to actually dip out of the let's go ahead and share the screen, and then I'll turn my video off just because I don't know if it's going to let me do that. So since it won't let me do that, then I guess it's time for me to become my bestie, the raccoon on the earth. Okay, anyway. Okay. Oh, sorry, I have a whole bunch of stuff up, and that's not all necessary. So, do we want to start with Celine? Celine? Um, okay, sure we will. So this is Celine Dion's chart, and I don't currently have the angles in, but we can put that all in. All right. So, let's take a look at the chart. So one of the things that a patron and I were discussing is the patterning of the chart. And if you notice up here in the top, excuse me, in the top right corner of the chart, there's all of these planets. This is what we call a stellium. So this is a focus of the chart. And that's all it is. Like otherwise, this is a splatter chart. Um, and because there's stuff down here and Leo rising and plenty of other things going on in the chart, but the Pisces and Aries specifically is very dynamic. And then we have this Mars up here at the top of the chart, 2 degrees of Taurus, which is ruling all of this Aries stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to kind of like get the chart here at first. And I think if you've watched the documentary specifically, that's what I'm going to be like talking about. But just at the very basis of the documentary, it's called I Am. And the mantra for Aries is I am. And I thought that that was very just interesting and telling, and blaring in the chart. So you can see here for people that aren't familiar with all the glyphs, In the ninth house, we have the sun, the MC, Saturn, the North Node, and the moon, all in Aries. Really taking a look at this stellium of planets here because it is blaring in the experience of Celine Dion. So, and Aries is about bravery and courage and tenacity and leadership and fire and passion. You know, the sun exalts in Aries, so we have the exalted sun here, and that exalted sun in Aries is ruling the chart as far as the ascendant goes, because the Leo rising, Leo is ruled by the sun is up here in Aries exalted. And you can really see that, like, and it's also in the ninth house. So with the exaltation of the sun and the ninth house placement there ruling this Leo, it's really giving like God-like energy and enjoying to be on the stage and being witnessed and being loved and followed and cherished in that way. And the performance of it all with the Leo rising. And then we have that little stellium happening in Pisces as well, with Mercury and Venus at 18 degrees of Pisces, and then Chiron there at 29 degrees. So this brings us two placements in this chart that are at that 29 degree, that anaretic degree. And when we have planets at 29 degrees, it just is a big emphasis on that energy and on those archetypes in the person's life. And I'm going to get into both the 29-degree moon and the 29-degree Chiron in what's playing out for Celine as she continues to move through her life. But we're going to take a look at those here in a little bit after I'm done kind of just rambling about what I see in the chart. So the other thing that we see is all of that Aries stuff being ruled by that Taurus Mars, right? And that Taurus Mars is strong, it's powerful, it's stubborn, right? So when we think about Aries and Taurus, we have the ram and we have the bull, and they're really, really trying to get something done. And in the in the documentary, you really see how she's not willing to fail or to give up at all. That's very Aries, that's very Taurus, this like almost stubbornness that Taurus brings, and the courage and the bravery and the resilience that Aries can bring. Almost to a fault, right? We see, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. When I talk about what's happening for Celine and in relation to the astrology, it's important to remember that the astrology is just a reflection. The stuff that's happening to her is not because of any of the astrology. It just reflects the energies that are being experienced down here on Earth, and that's the so above, so below type belief, etc. That I work under, at least. And so as I talk about it, there's going to be a moment where I go back and I talk about a specific, you know, like a split in the road in her life and in her journey. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying that with any judgment or shame, right? Life is confusing and layered, and there are so many different ways to live it and experience it and move through it. And so keeping all of that nuance in the container as we kind of talk about it, because life is messy, right? And all we can, you know, I can go back and look at the charts and talk about the energy, but that's just me looking back at someone else's life and experience, right? So I'm just somebody kind of witnessing and rambling about my thoughts. So take it as it is. And feel free to share your thoughts as well. As always, I love to hear what you think, what questions you have, what wisdom you'd like to share, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so here's the chart. There's again a lot to talk about. One of the other things that I was really interested in was this like well, there were two things that I thought were really interesting about, I mean, multiple things that I thought were interesting about the documentary. But one of the things that I really saw reflected in this astrology chart is when she was talking about the shoes and how she would wear shoe sizes from, you know, 6 to 10 or whatever that is, and she would make it fit. And I think the quote was something like, you know, if the shoe doesn't fit, I'll make it fit. And I think we see that in her life, you know, as it's continuing, like there's a lot of signs that her body, you know, she's human, she's a human being. And that humanness is showing here, opposed to what the exalted sun in the ninth house would like for her to be a god, right? And transcend having to be a human being in a human body. And I think all of that Pisces stuff plays in here, but if the shoe doesn't fit, I'll make it. That quote is very stubborn Taurus Mars ruling all of this Aries stuff, right? Like determination and grit almost, right? And then one of the other things that I was thinking about that really reflected in her chart was when she was sending that video to someone that she didn't know, and she had said something about like, I love you so much and I don't even know you, or something like that. And that to me screamed that Pisces conjunction with Venus and Mercury there, opposite Pluto, right? Because there's this like in-depth intensity of emotion and love and connection and compassion that like she didn't even know this person, right? But you could like feel, or I thought that you could really feel that genuine love and kind of like light coming out of her in that moment. And that to me was that very very much that Pisces conjunction, um and then the opposition to Pluto there really taking it like deep and serious, right? So I thought that was very interesting as well. And then just generally, as we think about like what's happening for her and for her body and neurologically, right? So we can see in her chart that, she she has, so when we kind of break down what's happening, neurological stuff is going to be Mercury and Uranus. The sun is our health, Saturn is like stiffness, Uranus is going to be the spasming of the nervous system stuff. Mars is also like muscles and pain. And in the chart, you can see that her Mars at 2 degrees is exactly square her ascendant, which is the body, right? And so we can see that coming up there. Uranus is down here conjunct Pluto, and it's opposing this Chiron over here. And so I thought that that was interesting. And again, this stuff needs to be triggered in the chart, right? So there's going to be other people that have this stuff in the chart, but when it gets activated by transit, things change. And we're going to look at the transits a little bit more. But I'm looking at again Saturn for stiffness, and we have Saturn here conjunct the MC, and that's being activated by Chiron. Currently, this stuff in Aries, Chiron is transiting Aries right now, currently in the sky. And so Chiron being a key player here as it moves through and conjuncts these planets in Aries for her. And then I imagine as it continues into Mars and Taurus, it's really bringing out that humanness again, right? Like Chiron is the wounded healer, and it's in myth talks about this wound that cannot be healed. And even when he becomes godlike, he's not able to heal that wound. And so this Chiron really showing up here, interestingly, as this like reminder that she's a human being having a human experience, and as much as she tries to will herself, right? So Aries again is also about the will to do something, right? Being willful, and that Leo rising really kind of amplifying that energy, but also the willfulness that comes here with that 29-degree moon in Aries. It's almost like keeping her caged in at this point. So I want to talk a little bit about the transits here that that were talked about a little bit, right? So if we go back, so I'm going to be looking at December 8th, 2022, which is when she made the announcement. And then I'm also going to look at June 22nd, 2008, which is when she noticed symptoms happening. And so I want to look at both of those charts specifically, and then the documentary that I watched and am kind of like basing this off of was launched on June 25th, 2024. So I also want to look at those dates, because those are the dates that she made the announcements really like publicly, and then that one where she really noticed the symptoms. So I want to start with that one, the one where she noticed the symptoms. So now on the outside we have that transit chart, and I want to talk about, when I first kind of see this chart, I think it's interesting. Um, Specifically, so this is when she was having that concert and she noticed the symptoms really for the first time. And during that time, if we look at where Pluto is, again, the transit planets are on the outside, and we see Pluto down here in the fifth house of creativity and joy, and pleasure. And I think it's very clear that she gets pleasure and joy, and is very creative in the space of performing and singing, right? And so that would be encompassed in her fifth house. So Pluto is the planet of deep transformation. Pluto doesn't care about our human experience, it doesn't care about our ego. And so when Pluto's involved, it's not a battle of the wills. Right? It's not about how willful you are. Pluto is going to transform. It's going to take away. It's going to end things and bring death to things, and decay and destruction to things that are done, that are ended, right? And there's no amount of will that is going to change that, right? That's Pluto. That's Pluto's energy. And so Pluto has been here in the fifth house for Celine for a while at this point. And again, this is 2008 when she first started recognizing the symptoms. And specifically, it's at 29 degrees. And we've already talked about the fact that she has two 29-degree placements natally in her chart, Chiron and the moon, both about our emotions and our feelings and our pain, and our internal kind of process, and Pluto here. So at this moment, right, I see it as, Pluto at 29 degrees of Sag is squaring her natal Chiron at 29 degrees of Pisces, and it's trining her natal moon at 29 degrees of Aries in the ninth house and the eighth house. And what this tells me is this is, first of all, a very vulnerable point in Celine's life. And I don't know necessarily what was going on for her in her life. Maybe somebody else does. Maybe somebody knows more about her life than what I do in this kind of experience. But and we could look at what was happening with her husband and all of that stuff as well. But so anyway, this is a very vulnerable moment. And with the trine to the moon specifically, this is like pulling her inward, right? Like this is about bringing her in, right? Because a lot of her planets are out here in the eighth, ninth, 10th house of her chart, which is the public sphere. This is the hemisphere that is seen, right? But this Pluto square in the fifth house is pulling her inward, right? She's very external. She's very seen. She takes all of her internal feelings and emotions and brings them into song and creates them to put them out into the world, right? That's her experience. But under this transit, it's pulling her inward. It's taking away that ability to project outward. And if we think about her voice, that's what was happening, right? Like she has this ability, or had this ability, to really project her voice and expression and creations out into the world. But as Pluto came and hit this exact square to her Chiron and trine to her moon, the trine to the moon is an invitation inward, right? But if you listen to what happened, she did not take that invitation, right? She did not go inward. She continued to push and push, taking pills and doing things, not listening to her body, right? The moon is the body, conjunct Mars, which is also the body in a different form. But this square with Pluto moving through, um, and hitting those really vulnerable and sensitive points in her experience, and she didn't listen, right? She quieted what the body was saying. She took this very like someone had mentioned that there's not very much feminine or internal receptive energy around her. And I find that very interesting also, because Aries is a very outward looking planet. It's a very quote unquote masculine or external or yin energy. Um, And what this transit, what Pluto is doing in 2008, is an invitation inward. And then if we move to 2023, let me change the date here to yeah, so let's move to December 8th, 2022. And that's when she had made the announcement that she had stiff person syndrome. And so if we look during that time, oh, another thing that I didn't notice or didn't mention before, if we go back to that last chart, can I find it? Oh, shoot, is it not here? Okay, I don't know if I can go back. Shoot. But the other thing that I wanted to notice that was what the moon was doing. So during that announcement, the moon can often like reflect things to the collective. So sometimes it's announcements. The moon was moving through Aquarius in 2008, and it was sextiling all that Aries stuff. And now when she makes this announcement, it's on the other side of that sextile to Aries and Gemini. And I just thought that was just an interesting point that the moon was coming through both times and hitting a supportive aspect to that Aries stellium. And air is about sharing information. And so yeah, I thought that was just an interesting piece. But here we are in December 8th, 2022, when she decided to make that announcement. And we talked about that a little bit. But if you look at Pluto now, then you see that it's at 26 degrees. It just came off of a retrograde. So it was backed up a little bit closer to that 29 degree of Capricorn, right? But since then, so from 2021 to still to the end of 2024, so we're not out of it quite yet, Pluto has been moving across 29 degrees of Capricorn, which is again that 29-degree mark of the next sign over. So this is the next time Pluto is at 29 degrees of a sign. It's coming in again and messing with these 29-degree Chiron, 29-degree moon in Celine's chart. And it's again bringing up this awareness that we can't look away from, right? And now where Pluto was trining the moon before, giving us an invitation to turn inward, which she kind of, it seems like from this perspective, that she kind of didn't take that offer, right, to turn inward and continued to project out and force herself to perform and use her voice, her instrument in that way, etc. Now Pluto at the end of Capricorn is squaring her moon. So that square to the moon is much harsher, right? And we see that kind of really harsh reality now that is completely out of her control at some points, that continuously pushing, right? A lot of times when I talk about Pluto transits, I talk about releasing, letting go of things that are going, right? Because endings hurt generally, but they hurt more if we hold on to things while they're dead. And I often think of like holding, like tug of rope, like holding on to rope. And instead of letting go and free falling and, it hurting, whatever, you hold on to it. So in addition to the pain of falling hurting, right, you also now have rug burn on your hands, right? And so that's kind of what I think about with Pluto transits. And so now we are at that point where we look down at our hands and we see also now there's rug burn as well. And I also haven't dealt with this situation. And so yeah. So I have a lot of feelings when I see her uh continuing to push. At one point it was very clear that she doesn't trust her body, right? She doesn't have, which I'm not putting any like good or bad on that. It just seemed very clear. Like she literally said like that she's not listening to her body. She's listening to the people who, you know, pretty much she has around to tell her what to do with her body, which I understand could be seen as like trusting professionals, right? But I also believe that each of us has an innate wisdom to heal inside ourselves, and if we're able to get the resource and the support, and she has that, right? Like she has bukus of money. We saw in that the amount of clothing and shoes that she has, like she has the resources to get the support. Um, but this will, right? This Aries ruled by this Mars and Taurus is so stubbornly pushing her forward instead of turning inward, which was a little bit, it's difficult for me to watch. And I think the astrology helps me, kind of understand that that's part of her experience, right? And that Chiron at 29 degrees of Pisces. Pisces is about our emotions, right? It's about compassion for self and for others. And it seems like she has a really, really hard drive and determination and within her that also shuts down a lot of that Pisces energy. And when we're looking at, we can see here in December 22nd, sorry, December 8th, 2022, Chiron's at 12 degrees of Aries. So it's coming into that Saturn MC conjunction between the sun. And so Chiron is moving through the wounded healer, and it's touching the sun, her health, the MC, how she's seen in the world, her legacy, right? Chiron's coming through, and she feels like, right, based on what she's talked about in the documentary and interviews, she feels like, without her voice and her instrument, that she is no one, right? Like that is not who she is. And so this Chiron coming in with the MC and Saturn is really blaring there, right? Like, who am I outside of this thing that I've mastered? Who am I outside of my legacy? And that's, just really blaring as it moves through. And the other thing is, current. So if we look at now, so the let me see, is that okay? So it came out June 25th, 2024. All right, so now on the outside is the date that this documentary was released. And you can see Chiron here at 23 degrees of Aries. So it's moved past her north node, and it's going to station retrograde here actually and come back to her north node. And so like there's some deep soul stuff that's also happening for her at this time. And but now we can see that Neptune here at 29 degrees of Pisces stationing in the sky, and Saturn at 18 degrees, both of these planets are about to station, right? So this was just, at the end of June, a couple days later. Hold on, I have it here. Yeah, so on the 29th, Saturn stations, and then a couple days later, on July 2nd, Neptune stations. So they're both at their station degree, and you can see them here conjunct her natal planet. So Saturn at 19 degrees conjunct her Venus and Mercury conjunction in Pisces, and then Neptune at 29 degrees conjunct that Chiron. And I think one of the things that I really took away from this documentary is how vulnerable she is, and how she's allowing people to come in and see it, and how that really shows up here in the Chiron stuff. She's taking her wounds and she's healing others through that, whether she is consciously aware of that or not. There's healing that is happening for people outside of herself by sharing this story and that vulnerability. And Neptune, Neptune is about, presenting a picture, uh, and it's hard to put into words, but it's really that vulnerable piece that I see here mostly. And then again, we have the transiting moon in Aquarius, again, sextiling that Aries stuff for her. So this is another kind of launch. of sharing information about her life. And yet again, we have the moon sextile in an air sign. So I think that's very interesting, especially because the moon for her is very important at that 29-degree Aries mark. So yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts. I had a lot of them, so I don't know, but one of the things that I wanted to look at now, so here's the clock for now currently, the day that I am recording. And um why were we looking at this chart earlier? I don't know. I hope I didn't screw up those dates. But anyway, we can see that Pluto, so this is why I wanted to kind of look at what's happening now, and talk about it, because we have Pluto currently at 1 degree of Aquarius, which is coming into, so starting next year after Pluto does its retrograde back to 29 degrees of Capricorn, which again will hit her a square to that moon at 29 degrees. So that transit isn't over yet. So we'll, kind of see how that all continues to play out in her life as much as she allows us into it. But then, so if we go to next year, so July 2025, we have Pluto now stationing at 2 degrees of Aquarius, which is conjunct her descendant, which means it's opposite her ascendant. The ascendant is our experience, how we're seen out in our life. So I'm curious what Pluto will do as it gets closer and closer to this opposition to the ascendant, which will also be squaring her Mars, at which again is the ruler of all of this Aries stuff. So I'm curious to see how this continues to play out. It looks like as of now, she's still kind of like forcing that external projection of her experience and her emotions and that kind of thing. So I'll be interested again to see how that goes, and I hope that she continues to be willing to share her story, as vulnerable as it was. Like I was 3 minutes into it sobbing like a damn I was sobbing. And I really appreciate her sharing on so many levels. Like there's so many things that I didn't even discuss here about like my personal experience with that process, I guess. But yeah, I have more to say, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut this here. Ask your questions, share your thoughts. Have you seen it? Have you not seen it? Are you interested? Let me know. Um, I'd love to hear about it. Okay, we'll chat another time. I'm not going to do the political stuff right now. We're going to do another video for it. Okay.